Hello everyone and welcome to the third day of the World Rapid Championship. It is Magnus Carlsen versus Vincent Keymer. This is round 10 and Magnus is currently in sole lead. If you've seen my previous video, these were the standings at the end. Magnus leading with 7.5 points, followed by Fedosev, Abdusattorov and Vincent Keymer, who is his opponent for this game. And this is, it's such a great game, such a high level game that I feel absolutely privileged to be able to show this to you. You will enjoy this on every possible level. So let's dive straight into it. Magnus with the white pieces opens with c4. And okay, if you're looking at the Vincent's rating, it's only 2590. When I say only 2590, I say as he is in classically 2700 player. He just doesn't play rapid all that much. So I'm sure you guys know that he... okay, now currently he's like 2696 or something like that, but he is definitely a 2700 player. So c4 by Magnus, knight to f6, we have d4, e6, and now knight to f3. We have pawn to d5, the queen's gambit declined is on the board, and Magnus goes for g3, going for the Catalan opening, showing that he is done with the funky openings. For the first 2 days he played a lot of weird stuff. Okay, in the second day he played a bit more solid, but now he throws out the Catalan, which means that now he's going to really throw everything he has at Vincent. Vincent goes for d captures on c4. We have bishop to g2, and now already a bit of a surprise from Vincent. He plays c6. Usually here you will see a6, you will see c5, you will see knight to c6, you will see bishop to b4 check. c6 is only the sixth most popular continuation, but as this is something that was prepared for the World Chess Championship, I'm pretty sure it doesn't come as a surprise to Magnus. He throws the knight to e5, which is a great square, especially now you don't have the c6 square for your knight, and bishop to b4 with check. We have bishop to d2 and now bishop back to e7. Magnus also wastes the tempo now, bishop to g5, h6, we have bishop captures on f6, bishop captures, and now knight to a3. Still waiting with the capturing of the c4 pawn, because if you do it with this pawn, then the d4 pawn would be hanging. And here it seems like you could go for something like bishop captures on e5. Let's say d captures, queen captures on d1, rook captures on d1, and b5, trying to keep your pawn, but this runs into the oldest trick in the book of knight captures on b5, and of course one of the reasons why the knight is developed, the a3. So instead, Vincent goes for queen to a5, and it is now, as of move 10, that we have a completely new game. The reason why it's a completely new game is because there is a game in the database where c3 was played, and c3 is kind of the strongest move recommended by the engine, but maybe Vincent just wanted to play something more solid, because c3 is pretty wild. b captures on c3, then you capture with the bishop here. Queen a5 now attacks the queen, attacks the knight and the pawn. Here you have to defend, and then queen captures on e5. Pretty crazy stuff. The queens are still on the board, and maybe this... well, Vincent just prefers a more calmer approach. As Peter Leko said, he says that I feel Vincent has a problem playing against Magnus, that they have very similar styles. Simply that Magnus is still clearly stronger. He said that before the game. So here, queen to a5 check, completely new game. And okay, Magnus goes for queen to d2, and here we have a trade. Queen captures, king captures, castles by Vincent, and now, only now, the pawn is recaptured. Knight captures on c4. Rook to d8 attacks the d4 pawn, and Magnus goes for king to e3. And here, watch this king for the rest of the game, just how strong the king is on e3. We have knight to d7, Vincent continues development, rook h to d1, adding another defender to the d4 pawn, knight to b6 now, and Magnus goes for f4. Now, you could... consider some other moves. F4 is very committal. Once you push a pawn, you can't unpush it, but here Magnus feels it is very justified. And the reason for that is if you play something like bishop captures on e5, you will play knight captures on e5, and now look at this, f6, and how does white play this? The problem is knight to c4 check will pick up the b2 pawn, so you have to bring the knight back to defend the pawn, and now after knight to c4 check, you will play king to f2, and now give up the d4 pawn, in order to go knight to c5. Now black has to trade rooks. For example, rook captures, and rook to d8 check is a pretty big threat. Like if you grab another pawn, rook to d8 check, look at this, king to f7, and now knight captures on b7, and the white definitely achieves something. For example, bishop captures, rook d7 check, king to f8, and now rook captures here, and it's Vincent is up a pawn, but Magnus has the monster bishop, and he has a rook on the 7th rank. That's, I mean, that's a pig right there, and he will have a lot of compensation for that pawn. So instead, bishop to e7 by Vincent, with ideas of maybe even remaneuvering the bishop to c7, rook 8 to c1, Magnus continues development, and only now f6. We have knight to d3, and here is the sort of moment of the game where Vincent has to be very, very careful. Here he played king to f7. Also, you should consider knight captures on c4, because this knight will haunt Vincent for the rest of the game. The way to do this is captures, and now execute e5. And now let's say d captures, and captures. You can't capture with the knight because the rook would hang. So f captures, and now bishop to e6. You give up one pawn, but you have the bishop pair. Magnus has a doubled e pawn. This is how you gain a lot of activity. But Vincent wanted to avoid this. He played king to f7 first, and now Magnus plays knight to a5. And here it will be very, very difficult, if not impossible, to activate your pieces with black. This knight is such a nuisance here. An incredible piece. So Vincent goes rook to b8. He wants to be able to develop the bishop. The b7 pawn has to be protected. And bishop to f3. You will also see how strong this move is. We have bishop to d6. Now Vincent wants to remaneuver the bishop to c7. And now king to f2. Magnus finally moves that king from e3. And now prepares e4, or maybe he wants to slow play it, maybe e3, but maybe also just e4, e5. Vincent says, all right, knight to d5, and now pawn to a3, not allowing any freeing knight to b4 moves. Bishop to c7 attacks the knight, and now, while you might expect something like knight b3 or knight to c4, Magnus plays the move that is almost always the strongest move in chess, and that is pawn to b4. Saying, okay, if you want to capture, you can double my pawns, but you are never developing your queen side. And the problem is, unless you capture, you don't really have a better move, because you can never play b6. The c6 pawn will be incredibly weak, and other than that, your options are very limited. Maybe just to waste time with something like bishop to b6 or something, but it doesn't really achieve all that much. So maybe best for black would be just to play a waiting game. But Vincent accepts the challenge. He plays bishop captures on a5, b captures on a5, and now bishop to d7. Now the c6 pawn is defended, so he doesn't have to worry about rook captures on c6, and he is now ready to execute b6. And okay, Magnus plays e4, attacks the knight, knight to c7, and now, while you would again expect knight to b4 to prevent b6, as knight b4 puts additional pressure to c6, Magnus just brings the king back to e3, and he says b6 is still not an issue for me, because if b6, now he can still play knight to b4 and put pressure on that c6 pawn. And now after captures and captures, you have to capture, otherwise one of the rooks will hang, and now rook captures on c6, and again Magnus gets a very, very promising position. For example, even if knight to b5, you can play bishop to g4, also one of the reasons why that bishop to f3 maneuver was so strong. So instead, after this after this king to e3 move, Vincent plays bishop back to e8. Again, sort of a waiting move, opens up the file for the rook, and only now knight to b4, putting more pressure on that c6 pawn, king to e7, and now Magnus strikes in the center with pawn to e5. The situation on the clock here is 7 minutes for Magnus and 2 minutes and some 45 seconds for Vincent, as it's not easy to find moves here for black. So Magnus gains more space by playing e5, but he gives up the control over the d5 square, so Vincent immediately puts the knight there, and now not knight captures that knight is just a monster controlling the entire queen side. Bishop captures on d5. We have c captures. You also could consider this, but then f5, and I mean, this is just incredibly strong, controlling all of those squares. You would not have fun playing this. So instead, c captures on d5, and now Magnus wins the c file for his rooks. We have rook d7 and rook d to c1. If Vincent wants to trade, then Magnus gets the other rook into the game. So f captures on e5, e5, and now d captures on e5. While you could also consider f captures on e5, this will pose more problems for black. Once g4 f5 comes, it will be very hard to defend. The downside is that it gives Vincent a pass to d pawn, and he can just start pushing it. He plays king to d8, tries to force a rook trade here, but Magnus not interested. He just brings the rook back and keeps all the tension, and you will still have problems playing b6 because knight to c6 check will just destroy black. So here Vincent starts with the d4 check. Magnus gave up some squares, so of course Vincent jumps at the opportunity to claim them. King to d2 and bishop to g6. Now the bishop pawn combo is doing a lot of good work here, but Magnus now goes for pawn to a6, making any advances impossible because of knight to c6 check. So Vincent plays the only move he has, bishop to e4, now guards the b7 pawn. And Vincent was down below the 30-second mark here. Magnus didn't want to invest too much time, but he did invest a minute for this move, and he plays rook to b5. Puts more pressure here, and now capturing is never possible. I mean, it never was possible, but now even the rook here is just straight out hanging. So he forces Vincent to go b6, and now he goes for knight to c6 with check, showing that this position will be winning for him. Bishop captures on c6. We have rook captures on c6, and now we have rook to c8 attacking that rook. King to e7 would still sort of hold, but we have rook to c8 here, and now Magnus could go for a lot of things here. For example, rook captures on c8 is an option, but he goes for rook captures on e6. The reason why this is so strong, rook captures, king captures on a4, is that there's no good way to defend. Magnus will just attack this pawn, eliminate the pawn, and win the king and pawn endgame. But okay, this is just a straight pawn, so rook captures on e6. Who would not play this? d3, and now just rook to d6. Point is that rook to c2 could be a problem now, so just rook to d6. If you play rook to c2, the king can just capture the pawn. So rook captures on d6, we have e captures on d6, and now king to d7, going after the pawn, but now rook to f5. Magnus just plays this with absolute class, showing that if you capture, just rook to sorry, definitely not that. Rook to f7, and now there's nothing you can do. This is hanging, and if you block, of course, just the king and pawn endgame will be completely winning for Magnus. So here, king to e6 was played, now d7. Beautiful stuff here, rook to d8, and now the position is again completely winning for Magnus, but it is up to you to help him win it. Feel free to pause the video and win the game for Magnus while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting the only winning idea. It's the king and pawn endgame. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is rook to e5 with check. And now there is, well, there's absolutely nothing you can do. Wherever the king goes, you're just going to play king d5, rook d5 and capture the pawn here, and that's pretty much it. So, and of course, if you capture, it's even worse. Rook to d5, check, king c7, you trade rooks, and again, the king and pawn endgame is winning for white. White is up a pawn, not much to be done here. So, king to d6 was played, and now rook to e3. That's how you go after the pawn. King to c6, Vincent knows that he cannot trade here, and now rook captures on d3. We have king to b5. Going for this pawn, this will give Vincent 2 pawns on the queen side, but just king to e3. Once again, the king returns to the glorious e3 square, and here you know you are 4 moves away from resignation. King captures on a6 was played, king e4, king to b7, and as he played king to b7, it was also in this position on move 48 that Vincent Keymer resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So the game would continue with something like king e5, king c7, you're going to bring the king to e6. Now you can't capture, there's nothing for you to do. You could play a few more moves, king, you will attack the rook, and now if king to c7, just rook to c3 check will force the king away from the rook, and that's pretty much it. So brilliant stuff by Magnus, and definitely something to keep in mind that Peter Leko said that he feels that Vincent's style is very, very similar to Magnus's, only Magnus just does it much, much better. And it really, the whole game can be summarized with this one move. where Vincent decided to start bringing the king into the game, where in fact this knight captures on c4 move was an absolute must. So he had to give up a pawn here. If you guys missed it or don't remember, here just sacrifice a pawn, and after all the captures here, play bishop to e6. You have the bishop pair, you have development. You will be able to fight. Doesn't matter that you're down a pawn. Activity is compensation in itself. But he decided to go king f7 and this knight to a5 move. You can see how principles in chess are often helpful in guiding us, but sometimes they are meant to be not just broken, just just absolutely destroyed. As here you put a knight on the rim. The knight on the rim is grim, but as we say here, the knight was the Grim Reaper. So yeah. That's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Jeff Graves, David Rice-Oxley, Kevin Clark, Chris Mallon, and Rapid Boss for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the FIDE World Rapid Championship until it finishes. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.